Hi there, and welcome back to the HE Enable podcast. This is the show all about sharing our experiences of disability, long-term health conditions, and neurodiversity in the British higher education system. I'm Cath, and this week I am joined by Sam. Unlike many of my guests, however, Sam is not only a fellow podcast host, but also a perfectly healthy neurotypical person. What Sam does have, however, is plenty of curiosity and questions about my experiences and the broader experiences of disability in higher education, and he wants to learn more in a non-judgmental space. This is something that I am more than happy to provide for him as a platform to learn more, so I will actually be answering his questions today, which is very exciting. But before we start, Sam, I have a question for you. So first of all, hi. But
Yes, hello.
hi, what was your the kind of methodology behind gathering these questions for me?
Yeah, I mean, I just listened to your other podcast episodes and then kind of was writing down what came to my mind just naturally. I mean, to be honest, you kind of have quite a lot of questions that naturally come up, I think, I mean, at least I do when I think about someone else's life. Like, I mean, that's why I have a podcast because it's just, you get a lot of curious about how things are for a different person, and especially it's like if you listen to someone's podcast and they are different in another way, like maybe they like maybe a painter, and you have lots of questions like, oh, so how do you like first of all decide what you're going to paint? I mean, it's not obvious. So basically, yeah, I just listened to all of the episodes, and then kind of just jotted down some questions I had, and yeah, here we are.
Cool. So what was the first question that you have for me?
Yeah, the first question, I think a good question, and people can Google this, so it's not like, but it's just to define ADHD because I think that's what something that comes up a lot. People talk about it a lot, and I think for maybe for listeners who listen to this that don't have ADHD or hear about it a lot, it's useful to set that like kind of groundwork for what it actually is.
Yeah, so before we continue that, what do you think it is? Kind of just so I know where
That's good.
I'm
Yeah, that's a good.
starting
That's a good
from.
question. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think from what I understand, um, it's like, oh God, yeah, what do I understand about it? Um, it's like you are quite hyperactive. That's like the most famous symptom, I guess you can say. I think, right? People think of that a lot. And focus is difficult. Like, so it makes you hyperactive and difficult to focus, and you're basically just on the go all the time in your brain.
Yeah. So what you're describing, a lot of the when a lot of people who aren't don't really know about ADHD necessarily think about it, they probably think of like hyper 10-year-old boys or like young kids running around and kind of wreaking havoc. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, that's the kind of picture, yeah, that's painted, yeah.
Okay, so that's like surprisingly based on quite old presumptions. Obviously that type of ADHD does exist, but
Mm-hmm.
it is like that narrative is slowly changing. So for example, like ADHD is being diagnosed a lot more now in women, with
Mm-hmm.
a completely different, like not completely different, but like distinct enough set of symptoms that it does have to be researched in its own right. Because you'll find that, especially in like the 50s and stuff, or probably not the 50s, but when this was like first becoming a thing, I think it was like the 80s, it was mainly in those like hyper boys, and like all the study was biased towards that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, ADHD in itself stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I think one of the big, not issues, but like misnomers about the name is that you have a deficit of attention, and what you normally find is that your attention is misplaced, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like instead of it being like, oh, I can't focus on my work, but I for example can play video games for like 10 hours a day, like, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll find that in a lot of, like, I've heard that said about like teenagers with ADHD as well, right? Like it's not necessarily an attention deficit, though it can look like that. It's normally that the attention is can't be placed like in where you want it to be necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of about like creating cognitive ease. but yeah, it also like it manifests a lot of comorbidities. It might be part because I probably need an ASD diagnosis as well, but like I have a lot of sensory stuff,
What's
um,
AFD?
autism,
Uh-huh.
autism spectrum disorder is like the full thing.
Okay, okay.
But the like kind of I have a lot of sensory stuff as well. Um, a lot of internal energy. I don't necessarily have a lot of external stuff. But it can affect sleep as well. It can affect a whole bunch of stuff.
Hmm.
My biggest ADHD symptom actually is I just interrupt people constantly. I have a lot of social impulsivity.
Hmm.
Um, so if you catch me in a moment, I'm sure I've interrupted you a load over the past few years.
To be honest, it's actually not something that I've like. There are some people in my life where I'm like, oh yeah, classic. Like, of course I love my dad, but he does it all the time. And he like intro, but you like, I really haven't noticed it that much. That's
Mm.
what,
It's probably because we never studied together.
yeah, probably.
Because
Yeah,
like
to be fair, we didn't spend yeah too much time. Yeah, probably.
yeah, I think that actually segues quite well into your next question because I have an anecdote for this one.
Yes. Yeah. So that was something I was curious about. I was because I think in your initial episode you said that you got diagnosed whilst you're at university, right? So I was thinking, well, were there times in your before you were diagnosed where you thought, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I actually should check this out.
I mean, my entire life, I never really saw myself as like normal, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. So like it wasn't like, oh, I think I have this condition. It was, oh, well my brain isn't quite like the others, but like it's fine. And
Hmm.
it kind of I think I started noticing it around at least like attentional like problems around like sixth form. So I'd go to the library after school to do revision in like year 13, and people would be like, I've been here for like 8 hours, I've been studying for 2 hours straight. I'm like, I can do 20 minutes and then I need like a rest break. Um, so while I never had my formal diagnosis, like in like when I was in school, that was like maybe a moment where I should have twigged it. But
Hmm.
the other thing is like I feel like the moment you enter university, every single bit of structure that you rely on kind of disappears, which is why I typically find like an absolute like surge of people at uni being like, oh my goodness, I think I have ADHD. I like can't cope with this because they lose all of the structure that they previously had,
Hmm.
that was like kind of helping them manage their symptoms. And I had that like quite badly. So I had like probably too many extracurriculars, and I kind of used that to make a balance. Um,
Hmm.
and then, but when we got to COVID, that all stopped, obviously. And I just like, I realized that I needed like something in the way of a clinical diagnosis.
Yeah, I was thinking whether you because you couldn't study as long as your peers, right? And some people might then go, oh, well, I'm just not smart or I'm just not like good enough. I'm not like, so did you find that you did that or were you able to just be like, I just have to do it differently and were you still kind to yourself?
I mean, as with many people who are undiagnosed for a long time with I find really any kind of neurodiversity, you have a lot of kind of comorbid health conditions. And what that means is it's like stuff that kind of typically occurs. And with ADHD, you have a higher occurrence of like anxiety and depression like symptoms, right? And what I
Mhm.
found was that it was really it was hard because I had undiagnosed ADHD, but obviously when you have the anxiety of like, oh my God, am I failing? Or like,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you pile that all on top, that can get really, like, that can get challenging and that can build a lot of like negative, like, self image, I guess. So
Mhm.
it's,
Mhm.
yeah, no, I think you can definitely, like, laziness is the classic excuse, right? Especially when you're like actually really, really trying and you're still not necessarily
Mhm.
seeing the
Mhm.
results. But you'd be like, oh, maybe it's because I have an anxious brain and it's like this, and it's not necessarily, oh, it's because this is a comorbidity of undiagnosed ADHD. Like, if you don't have the vocabulary to work with it, you can't manage it. But yeah, I think lazy is a pretty common narrative
Mhm.
for people who are undiagnosed. But it was, yeah. I'd say that was true for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I imagine that for many people, that's like the go-to to just go, oh, well, I'm just lazy then, rather than like, which is a shame because it's not your fault, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's especially in women, because the symptoms aren't necessarily advertised, but like they aren't necessarily, the awareness isn't the same as like necessarily in male symptoms,
Mhm.
or like for example, you can have men who present in similar ways to how biological women present, or like the other way around, right? And I think, yeah, the research hasn't quite caught up with the many different presentations of ADHD that we're now seeing.
Hmm.
And I think once we get like the big awareness of that and more research, especially, I think we're going to have an influx of people realizing that they're not necessarily lazy, but they might have
Hmm.
a different presentation of this like neurological disorder.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that brings me nicely to the third question, which is what are the most challenging parts of having the condition?
It depends on the context. So I do quite well in structure,
Hmm.
but because like I really like having my routine, but I can't kind of marry that to a particular time. So it's kind of, I have a couple of other health conditions, and I find that if one gets worse, all the others kind of get worse.
Hmm.
I think the most challenging part is probably like self-managing tasks, and not thinking that I can do it. I get quite bad. You know the term demand avoidance?
No. Is it like,
So
yeah, carry on, carry on.
no, it's fine. So basically, it's like if you're given a task to do, you just won't do it. And you'll find any means possible to avoid it, and you have to use like extra methods to like kind of get yourself to do it.
Hmm.
Um, I would have to have like a really rigid routine, or I physically wouldn't be able to like get out and do the work. So I find that, yeah, it's really hard to like self-direct tasks. It's why I'd be really struggling with. I'm really nervous about doing a PhD, to be honest. Like I'll be applying in the next year or so, but like that kind of self-directed work is quite scary, and it also means that the other big thing is that obviously when you're doing a research project, for example, there's like so many steps that you got to find the literature, you've got to like review it, you got to read it all, you got
Hmm.
to draft, redraft, get notes. Um, I find that I get overwhelmed very easily, and it can be kind of hard to ground myself. So I think, yeah, I don't know. Like I think it's mainly just the overwhelm is maybe like the everyday symptom, which is something that's just like a lot of grounding work, right? But I think if I'm not, say, at my current like 8 to 4, 9 to 5 job, like, and I lose that structure, I start to like struggle a lot more. Because that's kind of what I need.
Hmm. And what kind of, you say this grounding work, what does that mean?
Oh, it's just like breathing exercises, and
Okay.
like journaling's very good.
Hmm.
Any kind of creative outlet is very good.
Hmm.
Sometimes I even find if I have like the sensory energy for it, just being around people is
Hmm.
quite nice because it kind of pulls you out of your own head. I
Hmm.
find that having any kind of like steady kind of momentum is quite good, even if it's like, oh, I'm going to like do the dishes and then read a book. Like it can be really gentle. Um, and then but unfortunately it stops when you kind of like open your phone, I find, which
Hmm.
is maybe for people of our age a bit of a problem. But yeah, it kind of is what it is, isn't it?
Hmm. So times of change must be difficult for you then. Like as you mentioned, high school to uni, probably was because it seemed like that really highlighted the problem for a lot of people. But I guess maybe even when you went from your undergrad to your masters, that must have been difficult because you have to kind of shift everything shifts and all that nice structure goes up in the air maybe.
I mean, yeah. So my master started with a very intensive course. So I was like, I was doing something every day.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
Towards the end, yeah, it was unstructured, but like I was doing a degree. It's a 2 year master's. It had a significant research component, so I was kind of like expecting it, and I managed to like have mechanisms that made it fine. But
Hmm.
I actually found the biggest problem was transitioning into like my master's after my bachelor's, just because I was so burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't necessarily like the actual content, because like we met doing a research scholarship. I've been doing academic research since my first year of uni, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not necessarily the problem here. I think it was more that I like in the first episode I talk about my experiences at York. I love the people, but they messed up in some pretty significant ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I yeah, that but the burnout and the kind of energy hit that I got from that affected me way more than any of the academics did. And it put me behind quite significantly
Mm-hmm.
when I got to Oxford. So again, it is what it is, but I think it wasn't necessarily that like the transition from bachelor's to master's that did it in,
Mm-hmm.
other than maybe being terrified of writing a thesis.
Yeah, so it's just that you had such a heavy time at York, and that makes sense. And then my next question is, people seem to really have a problem with anyone that wears a different shirt to them, let alone is different in any material way. So I wonder if you faced any like stigma, any people being nasty about it.
I mean, talking of wearing different shirts, we're wearing very different shirts right now.
Yeah,
People can't
yeah,
see. Sam has a very like nice blue. You have like a kind of Minecraft Steve kind of shirt on, and I have
yeah.
got it's bright orange and covered in cacti.
It's
Very shout out to Run and
very
Fly.
summary.
Best shirts, man. I'm off to the boathouse after this. But
Nice.
yeah, so my shirts probably get some looks, but in terms of my brain, I mean the stigma I don't think it necessarily. So I passed bachelor's, and the moment I got to York, I was absolutely fine. I think socially, I wasn't in school. I struggled because socially they just weren't my people in school. The moment I got to like York and that, I the stigma went down massively. I think partly because of the people and partly because I felt more comfortable within myself, right? Like because you can kind of
Mhm.
explore like just yourself, right? So I think I never directly experienced much stigma, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I find that I love the term like a neurodivergent pack of wolves, where people tend to attract their own kind.
Mhm.
And it normally means that I'd meet someone, we get along like mysteriously well for people who have met the first time. And
Mhm.
they'd be like, oh, wait, you have like this. And then eventually you're like, oh, I probably have this too then.
Mhm.
um, but one of the big things about, I'm going a bit all over the place, but going like back to school with the underdiagnosis stuff that I was talking about, I got bullied quite brutally, not because of like, oh, you have this psychological disorder. No, like
Mhm.
people don't do that, especially not when I was in school. It was more like, oh, this is the weird kid who loves Pokemon and interrupts people a little too much.
Uh-huh.
So I think it was more that I didn't get a stigma for what I had, but kind of who I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I don't know whether obviously that is related to neurodiversity. Like I thought, like that is just who I am, 1,000%. But I never got the stigma directly because oh, you have this condition,
Mhm. Mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And people can be brutal about it. Like people, if you're not like absolutely like neurotypical kind of thing, if you like interrupt a little too much, people can be, especially at school, people can be like, oh, what the hell? That's not, and then kind of single you out for it. Or if you're a bit too loud, or basically if you're just a bit too much that the bully doesn't like it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's also like it's not necessarily bullies. I think it can be people who mean well, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think you can mean quite well and still be like you've got to tone it down a bit. And I think maybe this is a controversial opinion. I think part of it is a bit of a necessary evil in today's society. I think people should be unmasking, but I also think that we need to, especially like kids, we need to teach them it's okay to be different. But like
Mm-hmm.
obviously if you're in like sometimes you need to read a room, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily always a matter of masking, it's a matter of social convention that can lead them to mask. It's a really tricky balance.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you need to tell people to tone it down, I think if you do it in a gentle and an appropriate way, that can be fine. Obviously, you're not just like, hey, shut up, what are you doing? You don't do that at all, because people are normally trying very hard,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Like, don't just be like openly mean.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, there's a gentle balance between like, reading like helping someone like get an idea of a social situation, and
Mhm,
then
mhm,
like just telling them to, you know, shut up.
mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe like, what's a kind of good way if if someone's listening to this and they have a friend who like suffers like a lot in social settings where things situations are awkward and stuff. How do you like go about, or if they can't read the room and stuff, like how do you go about saying it in like a good way?
So I used I think it depends on how they react, right?
Yeah.
Especially if some people are undiagnosed and they see it as kind of a fault in their character. If you
Hmm.
correct them, they can't, like, it can be quite bad for them, right? Like it kind of
Hmm.
perpetuates the negative self-image, and it can become maybe a point of friction between people, right? I think it depends. So when I'm quite a loud person. Like, dude, I'm a podcast host. I'm inherently quite a loud person. But my partner, who you have met, lovely man,
Hmm.
um, basically just hand signals me whenever I'm getting too much. You're like, do you know like Friends where he's like, oh, watch my mic,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Ross, like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
turn it down. I do. He kind of does that, and it's like you kind of gently bring a hand down, and I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I need to be quiet now. And I do that where I work in the school as well. A lot of the kids kind of just get it straight up, as if you do this, like, and you bring like one hand gently down, it does a lot for them. But I think that if you're being like, sorry mate, can you tone it down a bit please, I think there's a lot of like indirect ways you can do it. So you could start talking quieter, you could use non-verbal stuff, because especially if they have like ASD or something related to learning, you don't want to overwhelm them with verbal cues either. So it's good to have like non, like, lexical, I guess, ways of doing it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Hmm. That makes sense.
but also, like, if they have straight up social anxiety, like, sometimes just don't put them in the situation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
definitely.
it
Yeah.
it depends on the person and the circumstance and what's going
Mm-hmm.
on. And if they need to be there, just and they're fine, just support them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Now turning to my next question. Of course, this is sensitive kind of stuff for a lot of people, I guess. And if you've got, if say you have ADHD and you've kind of been had a bit of bullying because of the symptoms before, it's kind of sensitive, right? People, and it's emotional. Sometimes people ask you questions about it, you might get upset, and rightly so. So, as someone, sort of a neurotypical person, like how I'm very conscious that I don't want to come across as like offensive, or like I don't want to ask the wrong thing and someone go, oh, like that's rude.
Look at this
Because
guy. Yeah.
yeah, like because I'm genuinely curious. So when someone's genuinely curious, you can ask kind of a naive question that comes across really wrong.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many things where people are different, and if you ask a question about it, you can come off wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's the best way to approach, like if you're genuinely curious about something, like if you've got a friend who has some kind of autism and you want to ask questions, but you want to do it in a polite kind of, what's the best way to go around that?
So first of all, that, like, I'm really glad that you've asked that, because I think we agreed when we chatted about this before, because we were like,
Mhm.
I got someone I want to do a podcast with who doesn't meet my demographic at all.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
do we do? And I think the thing that we kind of settled on was we wanted this episode to be questions that you couldn't necessarily ask,
Mhm.
like, if you're like in any other setting, right? Like, we were like, this is a totally
Mhm.
open platform, prep the questions that you want, bring them here, and I'll answer them like judgment free.
Mhm.
So I think obviously this is a very different platform from what you get in a social setting.
Mhm.
Um, it's potentially something, but not something you're going to see every day. I honestly think it depends how close you are with the person,
Mhm.
like, in terms of asking them. So some people are very open. I run a disability podcast. I've always been very, very open about this, because I think it should be normalized more. But I know for some people, especially if they're like trying to be neurotypical presenting in like an office environment, right? Like, where there are like very real like fears of prejudice for them. I
Mhm.
think you've got to kind of talk about like it's kind of like an eccentricity, I guess. That's not
Mhm.
necessarily the right term, but like I always find that I always just check where people's thresholds are. I'm like, hey, is this too loud for you? Is it like, are you okay with this? You know, is this texture okay? I guess in a way it's really hard for me to answer this question because I've never been on the neurotypical side of things, right?
Mhm.
Even when I was undiagnosed, like I wasn't normal. So
Mhm.
I think it depends how close you are on the person. You could always be like, hey, like I have questions about XYZ, but I'm really worried that some of them will sound ridiculous or like
Mhm.
rude. I don't want them to be. Is it
Mhm.
okay if I ask you some questions? Like, I
Mhm.
think with anything in life, if you can communicate the boundaries clearly on, hey, this isn't malicious, I just want to know XYZ. Like, unless if they say no, you don't continue. But if they agree, then you like obviously you're allowed to have that narrative with someone and it can be really, really productive.
Mhm.
Um yeah, I don't know if there are any other like open platforms like this one, because obviously this is quite a different opportunity, but I think as long as you can find a lot of things out, as long as you are kind to people, you are non-judgmental, and you kind of understand their boundaries.
Mhm.
Um, and it's good to know like particular pain points, like loud noises, for example, some of the ASD, particular textures, um, and like knowing what stuff that might be in advance. Think about, oh, are you okay with this noise? Are you okay with this many people? And then you can kind of check in with them as well once you know what like the common threads are that some people with like ASD, for example, might be struggling with.
Mhm. Okay. So kind of just don't go asking questions like, if you come up to, I do have autism, was it like make sure to approach it in a kind of what's the word? Gentle way, like preface it with, are you okay with me asking questions? And also maybe just do it with people that you know quite well already, you know?
Yeah, or like even let's use the autism example. I have one of my friends who I love her to bits. She adores trains.
Hmm.
But if I like twigged, for example, that she had like ASD, I'm like, oh, but you like trains, right? And that's like, unless you're also like set the precedent that you're neurodivergent, and there's like the whole social thing that goes with that. If you're like a neurotypical person, you're just like, oh, but you like trains, buses, Pokemon, and video games all at once, or you're like a savant, right? Like you could do like all the maths,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and you're like a child genius with like no social functioning. I don't know what
Mhm.
people have
Yeah.
wildly different views, right? As long as you're not being obtuse, I think normally if people mean well, it's okay. But if you're
Hmm.
ever in doubt, just check the boundaries with them. Like
Hmm.
boundaries are king in any area of life, regardless of your like neurological background, right? Like those things are
Hmm.
important.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, okay, and then turning now with the last two questions to university life and stuff like that. So, what do you think like the worst um, part of higher education was in relation to your neurodiversity? Like maybe there's, I know that they, what was it? They lost your
Oh, they lost my support plan twice
support
at two
plan. Yeah,
unis.
so
Yeah.
that's probably like the worst incident. But like, I'm curious to kind of get the flavor of how you feel towards in general towards higher education. Well, not maybe in general, maybe just towards the worst part. So what is it that you wish they did better?
I think that I don't know because higher education, especially the further up you go, you're going to find more people with neurodiversities inherently.
Hmm.
Because, again, well, let's go back to the autism example. You get people with special interests, and those special interests you can make into areas of study, right? Almost all the time. Like, I almost ran a video game history event like last year, and I want to
Oh.
study ADHD, right? You can make
Hmm.
special interests into a job, but it does mean that you have like an overwhelming neurodiverse population, like kind of there. But people mean very well at almost every institutional level. There's a lot of awareness going on right now. Obviously, universities want nothing for the best for their students normally, but that doesn't help when the systems fail.
Mm.
The people usually mean very, very well, but the institutions don't, and the actions of institutions don't necessarily reflect that. And we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of placed in this system that, yeah, people have done stuff in before, but is it gonna be the best thing for us? I learned that from being on Student Voice for many, many years, is that there is a lot of red tape to like get things changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think inherently you can't change big institutions at once, and there are valid reasons for it, like contractors, and you have a period in for this, and you need to get feedback and groups, and you obviously feedback is incredibly important, especially with inclusion. But I think it can also mean that you have a load of honestly very well-meaning people and absolutely useless structures.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, I mean, but it's the same thing. Like, even if you go for like ADHD diagnosis forms are like 7 pages long of just writing, right? Like it's or like more than that, way more than that. Depending on the like country and where you're getting, or the provider and where you're getting diagnosed. So it's kind of an inherent thing. I think obviously disability services and the distribution of support plans is a big pain point of mine that I'd like to see improved, and possibly some more structure for people on very unstructured courses,
Mm-hmm.
where they might struggle otherwise, and having kind of more study groups and stuff dotted around, kind of as standard instead of as like a really unique thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the most part, like it's being able to give the well-meaning people the system that they need to work in order
Mm-hmm.
to do their jobs most effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a broad, vague answer, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah, no,
also
that's good.
like you always like look at people like, oh, these like they're really nice, but this service
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely useless to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but what can you do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it must be like kind of confusing the mismatch between like, I feel sometimes you feel like just completely forgotten by the actual system of it, and then you meet the person behind it, and they're like nice. So it
Yeah,
doesn't you be expect them to be like, oh, I'll go away, don't have time to listen to you today, but then they're like, oh yeah, come sit down, have a coffee, da da da. And so what like how do you think people should go about trying to get that system to be a bit more, I guess maybe flexible, or I don't know what kind of word it is, basically to be a bit more responsive to the wishes of those behind it.
you just got to be loud.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know the Equality Act quite well, which helped me a lot because
Mm-hmm.
I can be like, you legally need to provide me these adjustments, but it also means that you're spending, I like get things in writing, right? Like that's really important. Always have a paper trail, but like this is legal advice.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is what you should be doing to kind of back yourself up in like
Mm-hmm.
a case when something fails, right? But it also applies, like it's the best advice I can give
Mm-hmm.
is like you treat it as if you need evidence for stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you just like you learn how to self-advocate, because the louder you can get, the higher up it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously don't like harass people and keep it within reasonable boundaries, or then you'll be completely dismissed in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can kind of work with it,
Mm-hmm.
or like I guess work with and against the system, like hey, I respect that you're doing a lot, but like I need this sorted and this is getting ridiculous, then yeah. Or you just like befriend them. Like I did a lot of student voice and I ended up befriending a lot of people on staff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think regardless of what it is, go to like if you go into that situation like, hey, I assume they're overworked. I assume disability services is stretched way thinner than it should be at every university I'm at. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you treat them with the kind of mutual compassion while doing like, sometimes you can be angry, but just don't be mean at the person.
Mm-hmm.
Like have that compassion, whereas people aren't probably there for it to fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also like learn self-advocacy, and it's unfortunate because that is exhausting and it can be really, really like taxing. So if you ever need to do that kind of self-advocacy, I'd say have your support network with you as well, like have a really strong support network. Because if something goes wrong, fixing it or at least having it remedied in some way can be absolutely exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so kind of like uh, making sure that your issues are heard and knowing your rights, and kind of that can be a big sort of factor for change.
Yeah, I think that disability services are so busy that you will fall through the cracks
Hmm.
if you're not careful. So
Hmm.
it's kind of a matter of making sure that you don't fall through any cracks. Or if you do, you get it sorted as quickly as you realize.
Hmm. Okay, and then my final question is kind of going full circle. So, how did your uni life change once you were diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed in 2021, and that had meant that I had spent an entire pandemic indoors, and I was kind of transitioning back to in-person education anyway. So I don't know if I necessarily noticed a change post-diagnosis in the fact that so much was happening anyway, that
Hmm.
the kind of profile of my day-to-day was changing a lot too, right? So I don't think that was necessarily very noticeable. I did get medication, and that was really helpful for what I was doing. Um, Being titrated while you're finishing a degree, I don't necessarily recommend. Um, but I think in York was kind of a write-off. Like I got the diagnosis in my last year. I couldn't start medication till about 2, 3 months later because I was traveling, especially to the UAE, which obviously has very strict like stuff on drug. Like, they physically couldn't send
Hmm.
me anything because it's a classy drug. Like right, the stimulants I was taking. So I didn't really notice any change, but I found that, and I was also like, because I was having a lot going on at York, I was already kind of heading downhill anyway.
Hmm.
I think the biggest change I found wasn't necessarily after my diagnosis, but in the my first year at Oxford, which is
Hmm.
the academic year after, where I was kind of on the other side of a new diagnosis, a fresh burnout, um, like a lot of like a degree I barely made it through, and I think that was a big catalyst for change, where I finally had a little bit of breathing time, and I kind of processed stuff. I think that was, but again, that was another life change, right? Like I moved cities, I moved unis, I was
Hmm.
doing something new. So I don't know whether I can pinpoint my life changing just because of my diagnosis, but I can say that after I got it, I kind of, the awareness of what was going on helped shape what was happening next a lot more. But I don't know if I could necessarily pinpoint, oh yeah, like my attention got better. Like
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it did, but I was also dealing with a lot of stuff, both, internally, health wise, psychologically, and in just the
Hmm.
world and my life. So
Hmm.
I don't know whether I could necessarily provide kind of a balanced view of how it changed my life specifically, but it obviously did. I
So it's
learned
maybe
it.
more like a protracted, like kind of like how grass grows. If you look at it from day to day, you don't really see a change. But if you look at it from month to month, you're like, oh, look at the grass.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's grass now. But I did have something I was going to say about this. I think that it wasn't necessarily how it changed my experience, but how it changed like self perception, which is obviously very, very different and is related to how like you grow as a person. Obviously, like my brain still developing, but
Hmm.
that's, yeah. I don't think I could necessarily pinpoint, but I think it was more of a, I became more self aware, I became more self compassionate, and that was kind of like slow growth that happened kind of over time.
Hmm. Okay. And do you think it helped you with being like, okay, I need to have these certain things in my life to make sure that I do well because I have this thing?
Yeah, I mean, you find that anything that like affects people, especially
Hmm.
like your neurotypical peers, probably affects you to a greater degree. So like I like loud noises and stuff kind of go through me. And I like just make sure that I have my headphones if I need to. I have like my weighted blanket at home. I have, if it's
Hmm.
really extreme, I have ear defenders, right?
Hmm.
Like it's mainly just kind of, I try and preempt what's going on, But I find that with managing most conditions, if you can, just hitting the fundamentals of like food, water, sleep, and getting those right, you'll probably be better than your peers
Yeah,
in
yeah.
many respects. But getting to that point can be hard in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, perfect. That is the end of my question list.
Oh, wow.
So I think this has been definitely for me, it's been very insightful. And you don't really, like I said, you don't really get to ask these things just because you're worried that I don't want to stumble upon something that's not very nice for this person that I'm talking to. And then also you don't really get the time, like unless I think you have like a sibling who has like a neurodivergent condition, you don't really like. You're not going to sit down with someone and go, "Oh, do you have anything? If you do, let's talk about it." So it's been really insightful, and I hope like the people who are listening to this who don't always get to ask questions, it's been good for them, and I help them understand and put them in a position where maybe if they have a friend who does have a condition, they can ask about it.
Yeah, I mean, so did you want to like chat about your own podcast for a second?
Yeah, I can do. I'm not. I don't. One thing I kind of hate in life is sales. So I'm not a big salesy person. I do have a podcast. Um, it's called About 25, and it's kind of just about folks about the age 25. So if you're kind of 20 to 30, really was the kind of idea behind it. So if you like it, if you like that kind of thing, you can go listen to that. It's on Spotify. It's not advertised anywhere at the moment. It probably will be at some point. But yeah, it's just nice to chat to you. You've been on it. Interesting person you are. And it's just nice to talk to folks our age that are passionate about stuff. So yeah, that's what I have over there.
Yeah, I was on your podcast like a year ago. That was a while.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, a long time ago
that was
actually.
pretty, yeah. It's
So
my last
yeah,
address.
so yeah, yeah. So at some point I'll advertise about it. We have got about 30 episodes, or just a few over 30. But it's
That's
good fun.
that's more than me. Fair play, man.
Yeah, well, I think I'll catch up though because you do your episodes much more frequently than I do. So I think you do yours. What is it? Every week or
I
so?
try weekly. Right, I'm going to do my
Yeah.
spiel. Let's wrap this up. So,
Okay.
HG Enabled is the show all about sharing experiences of disability, neurodiversity, and long term health conditions within the British higher education system. And sometimes we do slightly different episodes like this. If you're interested in sharing your experience and coming on the show, absolutely feel free. If you drop an email at henabled@gmail.com, there's also the Instagram, which is at henabled. You can reach out on there. I'd love to have a chat and have you on. But Sam, thank you so much for bringing these questions to me and letting me answer them.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care, mate. Cheers.